I've been playing outdoors since I was a kid, standing by the front door at around 2 years old, hollering, "Side, side," trying to get my mom to let me go play outside. Now, after 30 plus years working in the outdoor business, I'm dropping insider conversations every week with brand leaders, guides, marketers, CEOs, and others that make the outdoor business a trillion-dollar juggernaut that drives product innovation, revenue, and public policy for everything outdoors. I'm Rick Sayes. Welcome to the Outdoor Biz Podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey guys, it's me, Maddie, your host. I'm popping in to let you know about the Who Runs This Park newsletter that you've got to sign up for. With the newsletter, you get to see highlights of each episode, fun pictures typically of me and the superintendent cheesing, stay up to date with all that's going on in the Who Runs This Park world, and get to read Maddie's outdoor obsessions, the part of the newsletter where I pick 3 things from the outdoor world to highlight, whether that's a favorite product or brand, or podcast and publication that I came across. Sign up at linktree/Who Runs This Park. That's linktr.ee/Who Runs This Park. Check the show notes for more information.
I had way too much beginner's luck. I was definitely at the right place at the right time. Yeah. So.
Welcome to Who Runs This Park, a podcast where you are invited into the hearts and stories of those who have committed their careers to the protection and preservation of our great national parks. Who Runs This Park aims to be a catalyst for inspiration, highlighting all that goes into managing our national parks and building a sense of appreciation for the invaluable beauty, diversity, and history of our protected lands. Today, we're joined by Barclay Trimble, Mammoth Cave National Park Superintendent. Before Barclay's time at Mammoth Cave, his extensive experience spans the whole U.S., from being Deputy Regional Director in Atlanta to placements at parks like Grand Canyon, working with Denali and the Outer Banks Group. He has experience both in management and in many business finance positions, and is a fellow Texan, so we love that. For those who aren't aware, Mammoth Cave is located in Kentucky and is one of the earliest tourist attractions in the U.S., has the world's largest cave system with over 400 miles. But the caves aren't the only way folks can recreate, with over 85 miles of surface trails for hiking, biking, horseback riding, camping, etc. Barclay, welcome to Who Runs This Park.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. A way that I like to start off the interviews is by diving into your time at Mammoth Cave, and then we'll take a step back into some historical experience. But what's one of the more unique or crazy situations you've had to deal with as Mammoth Cave Superintendent?
Well, I'd say probably have 2 of them, and I'll start with the one that was a little more challenging first, and that was probably just managing a park during COVID and, getting through and, the world shutting down and getting through that, and then trying to figure out how to make sure my staff felt safe as we were introducing visitors back into the environment. And so just working through that whole process was an interesting challenge that was unique that I hope we never face again.
You and me both.
But probably the fun one that comes to mind, we just recently completed about a year ago, and that was actually having the Louisville Orchestra and Grammy Award-winning conductor Teddy Abrams and Yo-Yo Ma have a concert in the cave. And so that was several years in the planning, but last April, almost a year ago today, we had a couple of concerts down in the cave with a small contingent of the Louisville Orchestra and Yo-Yo Ma and a choir group out of Louisville. That was really a unique experience.
Yeah. Did you bring down speakers and stuff, or were the acoustics of the cave good enough that you didn't need any amplification?
The conductor, Teddy, was very happy with the cave environment, so it worked out really well.
Yeah, that's cool.
So about the only thing they brought down was a little lighting, and so it wasn't in the complete dark, but other than that, the cave took care of itself. So
was it like a lottery system, or how did folks get to
It was. We figured it was going to be something that people would be very interested in, so we worked with recreation.gov, the group that does all our ticketing, and so we put a lottery system in place and just a random draw to come back in. And so we only issued about 500 tickets, and we had, if I remember right, close to 28 or 30,000 requests. So it was
that's a ton.
It was overwhelming, the amount of people. We had international people in the lottery system. We had people from all over the United States, from Hawaii, everywhere wanted to fly in and just be a part of it. So it was a great experience.
It's making me think of, so the eclipse passed through Texas, and I got to go up to Waco and spend some time with the current Sequoia and Kings Canyon superintendent and like a ton of old Smokies, like the ex-superintendent and a lot of folks who used to work there and have retired. And they were talking about, because Clay, the current Sequoia superintendent, was deputy superintendent at the Smokies when the eclipse went through the Smoky Mountains. And they were talking about how they had a similar thing where they did a lottery system and reserved, I think, the Klingman's Dome.
Right.
I don't know if it's like the peak at Great Smoky Mountains, but a similar thing of took a lot of planning and coordinating and lottery tickets. And I mean, even you putting into perspective, it's like a harder acceptance rate than like getting into college.
It was, the acceptance rate was tough. But luckily we were able to do it, but it was overwhelming in the fact that the conductor, Teddy Abrams, wrote a brand new piece of music just for this event that included Yo-Yo Ma. So it was a brand new piece. So there was a lot that went into it.
Is there a recording of it? Or is it?
They're working on some aspects right now that will hopefully have a kind of a recording, but actually kind of a preview and a documentary that talks about all of it. So they're trying to put the final touches on that, and they hope to get that released here in the future.
Okay, I'll keep my eyes out and let the people know of, in the future you can check this out if you didn't get the chance to.
That'd be good.
See it in person. That's cool. Taking a step back, what led you to work in the Park Service in the first place? I know for folks who aren't aware, you got your degree at UTSA in business. And so how did you make that jump into the Park Service?
It was sheer dumb luck and, an aspect for jobs that I never showed up on a resume. So I would just say, growing up, we had the family outings. Mm-hmm. For the older audience, they'll understand, but getting in the station wagon with your family and just driving to the national parks. And that's exactly what we did growing up. So my parents were very influential in just kind of making sure that we got out and we saw different parts of the country and, we got to the different national parks. So we grew up doing that. And then 3 of my summers during college, I worked in Yellowstone National Park for a concessionaire. If it was on my resume, as it would say, I was a petroleum transfer engineer. So I pumped gas. And so that was it. And it was really just to be up there. You'd work 5 days, but they would start you early and let you off early your last day. Mm-hmm. So we had about 2.5 days to go out and hike. And so we were just up there for the experience of Yellowstone and spent those 3 summers just hiking all over the park and the Tetons and other areas. So because I've always had a love for it. And then that even kind of dwelled it even a little deeper into it. And that's actually kind of the job that got me into the Park Service, the one that I never thought was going to show up on anything and was really just for fun.
Did you go from being like a seasonal worker to a full-time worker, or how did?
No, I didn't.
How did that transition?
As soon as I graduated college, I actually went to work for a small accounting firm for a little bit and kind of decided that wasn't going to be my calling. And the Park Service at the time, back in the early 90s, went through a professionalization aspect where they wanted to either accountants or lawyers to come in and help with the concessions program. And all the concessionaires come in and, provide all the food and beverage and lodging and gifts. And so, there's some fees that come back to the government for that opportunity. And so they were trying to professionalize that rank. So because I had that accounting degree, that's what got me in. But then I also had experience on the concession side. I'd worked for a concessionaire. So I knew what they were all about, why they were there, and a little bit about that. So I think that's what really inevitably got me in the door.
And what was that first role in the Park Service?
My first role was just as an accountant in the concessions program in Washington, D.C.
Cool.
So I left Texas. I became the fellow Texan. I actually had to get up and move and get to Washington, D.C. So that was a tough part of the move, but that was good. It's been great since. So.
Yeah, that's a big move. I just moved back I was in New York for 4 years and then just moved back to Texas. So it's funny to see.
You understand the big city move. So
I do. Yeah, I really do. Yeah, I think that's something that was unique about when I was researching for this interview was your experience on the business side of things. And one of my favorite things there's many favorite things of these conversations in this podcast, but one thing I really like is learning everyone's different path and kind of seeing the unique different ways that people become superintendent. And I was excited because I haven't seen a ton of, or I haven't gotten to talk about a lot of the business side of things, and then that transferring into being a superintendent. So I know some of the roles, and I'll just list some of them out that I found, but I'd love to hear some of your favorite moments from those different experiences. But I know you were a recreation fee manager for the Intermountain region, the chief of finance for the concessions division. So kind of got more experience and management experience in the concessions realm outside of being an accountant. And then the acting chief of business management of Glen Canyon Recreation Area. So those are kind of the big ones that I found. But I'd love to hear what sticks out to you from some of those more proper business roles.
I think all of them just had great learning opportunities, I think, as you talked about. So as I started with the Park Service as an accountant, then obviously was able to take that opportunity to take that next step up and start some management level aspects of becoming the chief of the finance branch. And so that
Right.
particular group was just there to look and oversee the financial side of all the concession operations, which are multi-million dollar operations in some of those bigger parks. So getting into
Right.
looking into the financial statements, looking into the payments they were receiving, helped to solidify and determine what the payments were when a new contract would go out, what would
Mm-hmm.
be in the prospectus that people would be bidding on. So that obviously got me fit well with what my education was, and then really then started taking other opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
many details and other opportunities like the one that you talked about at Glen Canyon was able to go in and help oversee, they have a large concession operations there with houseboats and lodging and food and beverage and so
Oh.
there's a lot going on the lake, but then was also overseeing the entrance fees and that
Mm.
aspect of the business side of that particular park. So got to look at those particular different areas. And then at least with the
Mm-hmm.
Intermountain Region fee manager, that was when the Federal Lands Recreation Enhancement Act was recently created. So it was a brand new program on how these parks were going to start collecting fees at entrance fees and expanded amenity fees for other tour operations that are outside of just the entrance fee. And so I was
Mm.
able to help, kind of stand that up and figure out how that was going to work
That's
for a
cool.
whole region. So they worked well with where my background was, but also gave me plenty of opportunities to look at other park operational aspects, getting out and talking to the different parks. What's going to be successful? What's going to help? How can the region help? And so those conversations
Right.
were great to have.
So I haven't heard of that, actually, the Federal Lands Recreation Enhancement. Is that the ability to collect additional fees, you said, outside of just the entrance fee to the park?
Well, it authorizes both. So it's a temporary act that has never been put in permanently. So it's one that's in the Green Book that gets reauthorized at the time that then allows the Park Service the
Oh.
opportunity to come and charge what are called the entrance fees and expanded amenity fees, which are the fees outside of entrance fees, like campground fees. So so we don't charge an entrance fee at Mammoth Cave. So the park proper is accessible to everyone. But if you want to go into
Mm.
the cave, those are all done
Mm.
under guided tours to keep down the vandalism in the cave. And so
Mm.
those are
Yeah.
part of a fee structure that we have to come in and look at.
Oh, interesting. And are all of the fees associated with recreation.gov, do those kind of fall under this act?
I would probably say a majority of them. I'd have to look at them to be sure,
Yeah.
but I would assume,
Yeah.
yeah, the vast majority of them probably fall
Yeah.
under that act.
That's cool. I didn't know that. I was curious about the concessions division. So how does that work? Is it you have a spot within a park, a building or something where you could provide food and you lease out that space to a different concession operator?
So they do. The buildings, are inherently. I mean, they get into a lot of technicalities of what they are, but for
Yeah.
the gist of it, let's just say all the buildings are owned by the Park Service, and
Right.
then you would put a solicitation out that for multiple bidders to hopefully come bid on, and you're providing that opportunity for a concessionaire to come in and provide those services to the visiting public,
Mm.
and it can range from a bunch of different type services. There are climbing services in Denali. And then
Okay.
there's, when I was at the Grand Canyon, all the whitewater river rafting is done by concessionaire. I don't know how many contracts are there now. I think there were 11 at the time that I was there. So there was 11 different companies that would provide
Mm.
that service through the inner canyon. And, like what we have here at Mammoth Cave, we just have food and beverage and lodging, and we also have transportation. They provide our services to and from our cave entrances that are not associated right there by the visitor center. So we've got to transport visitors
Mm.
to and from those caves. So it can really be a whole cadre of services that each individual park may have.
Oh, I actually had just assumed it was like food and beverage. So that's
Yeah.
interesting that it expands to the activities. Obviously, I'm even thinking like Mount Rainier, hiking to the summit, I'm
Right.
sure is
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Somebody's up there,
concessionaire.
like
And
going into the bottom of the Grand Canyon. We have part of a concession operations was taking the mules and riding those down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon to stay in the lodging at the bottom of the
mm,
Grand Canyon. So there's a lot of services that are provided by some
yes,
great companies.
I joke that the more I do these interviews, the bigger my like bucket list grows. It's almost dangerous because I remember interviewing the Voyager's superintendent and just parks that I'm also, as I'm interviewing, learning a lot about in preparation and in the discussions. And it's just, the list is getting too long at this point. It's getting too expansive. I'm like, we're getting out of hand here, but
It's a good list to
keeps it
have.
fun. Yes, it is. How did you transition from the more business side to, I don't know if you would call it the park management side?
I think it's just taking opportunities, and that's the beauty of the Park Service, taking details and, just continual learning is a big proponent of where I am. You never know everything. So some of those things
Right.
you talked about, was at Glen Canyon. That was a detail I took there, and getting up to Denali.
And are details like different assignments?
They're like, usually they can be give or take, but normally like 120 days. So 4 months where you go in and you take a short-term assignment to go and learn something else. And did
That's super cool.
some stuff at Denali as a management assistant. I did a stint in Yellowstone in the concessions program, that time as a business manager at Glen Canyon. I also took an opportunity one time and actually went out and did a short-term detail with the NTSB. And so I went outside the Park Service, but I really wanted to learn how an organization like that acts when we have a horrific accident, how they spin up, how they get there, how they analyze the data. So it was just a great learning experience for me to see how an outside organization, just takes a horrific event, kind of like incident command structure we use in the Park Service, but looking at it from a different lens. So had an opportunity to do that. I've just had several opportunities I've applied for and was successful enough to get into. And that really helped me, learn more about park operations on the day-to-day stuff outside of being in the national or a regional office.
Yeah, no, it sounds fun because it's like internships in a sense, which is this idea that you get the opportunity to learn a super new skill set. And it's cool to hear that you can do that in a professional capacity and don't have to be a college student to do it. I mean, obviously you're a full-time employee, but it has the things that I like about internships are getting thrown into something over a short period of time and figuring it out, and it's new and all of that. And so it's cool to hear the different experiences of that.
It's been very rewarding.
Your details and just different things have been at so many different parks. What natural elements do you find yourself drawn to most of the time?
That's a good question. I don't know that I really have any natural elements. I mean, obviously, you start up north in Denali in the cold and the high mountains, and that was a great experience. I like to experience different parts of the country and just see what I don't know. And so it's not really necessarily elements. I mean, we enjoyed out west on the Outer Banks. We were at the easternmost part in the continental United States. And so that was a great experience, less dealing with the hurricanes that come up that,
oh my gosh,
that coastline, and dealing with a couple of those.
You're making me think of a conversation I had with Clay, because I think he was at the Gulf Shores National Seashore for a bit. And he was also saying every hurricane season, it's like, it was tough because it's pretty much a hurricane's hitting something on that shore.
I don't miss those days. I mean, every day starting June 1st, I was up at 6 a.m. with the Weather Channel and figuring out what was coming off the tropics and all right, where are we going to be? Where are we going to be lined up for the next 6 months? So it's
hurricane season starts in June. I didn't
realize
June
1st. Yeah, usually from June 1st about the end of October. So
wow, how far out do the predictions go?
We normally have plenty of notice. It'll depend on the speed, but normally you got 7 to 10 days where you're out. But we had a whole shutdown plan that we would have in place, and you want to make sure you get the park secured, but then give the employees enough time to get their own personal residences and everything else secured. So it's it's not an easy process to shut it all down and secure it as best you can. But Mother Nature is with all parks, and not just hurricanes, but rain events, wind events, everything else. I mean, she'll come in and your best laid plans don't always work out.
Yeah. And just the stress and pressure of making those decisions of, are we evacuating? Are we not?
Right.
Maybe some of those are determined by other governmental agencies, but yeah, I don't envy you in those times for sure.
Oh, it was all good. I had a little bit of experience growing up in Texas and Corpus Christi, so we got hit by a couple down there. So from the personal side, I knew what I was stepping into when I got in there. But just back to your question, I mean, it's just we've really, the time in our regional offices, we just really enjoyed Denver, really enjoyed Atlanta. I enjoyed my time in D.C. So I really don't have a specific attribute I'm looking for. It's more of me, it's more of the challenges that come with the particular parks. I like coming into areas that, that maybe aren't running as smoothly as they could be, and trying to figure out how we can make a better experience. So I like the challenges of that.
That's a great segue, because I love to hear each park I've learned, and I joke about this all the time. But every time I talk to a superintendent, I'm like, my gosh, there's a lot going on. Y'all are busy. There's a lot of things to manage and deal with and all of that. But what unique challenges does Mammoth Cave present itself compared to the other places you've been stationed?
I'd say probably the one that's probably most unique to here is one there's, well, not unique specifically to here, but there's only a handful of subterranean caves in the Park Service. So that comes with its own uniqueness right there in managing both surface and a subterranean environment. But
Mm-hmm.
probably for me, what's most unique about here is the size of the cave and the karst topography that surrounds Mammoth Cave leads to a lot of aspects that right outside the park boundary that can have a real detrimental effect to the subterranean environment. So if we
Interesting.
have an 18 wheeler spill over Interstate 65 and we start having gas or whatever could be a liquid load that something is occurring, which has occurred, all that material can leach into the ground system very quickly. It's the karst environment's very porous limestone holes. You're fully aware of being in
Oh,
Texas
yeah.
and all the limestone that's around there. But all that
Yeah.
gets into the aquifer and the water streams that are all feeding into
Mm.
the underground rivers that are in Mammoth Cave. And we have an endangered species, the Kentucky cave shrimp, that is only indigenous to Mammoth Cave.
Whoa.
So if we ever had an oil spill, it could decimate a population. So obviously paying attention to what's going on outside our boundaries is more of the more
Mm-hmm.
unique challenges, working with the farmers, trying to come up with the pesticides, using best management practices where they'll leave some swaths in there where the grasses and stuff can absorb some of that before it gets into the water system. So it really is kind of the activities that are occurring outside the park that we're continually watching to see what it's doing to the environment in the park.
Well, it's interesting because I think you always have to be aware of that to some extent as a superintendent, and stuff like that does affect groundwater quality or stuff, but it's maybe not as prevalent
Right.
because a part of your park isn't, like you said, subterranean. And I mean, the fact I did not know that Mammoth Cave had underground rivers. So that is cool. What is that? Are they like, I feel like Austin has aquifers. If
You
I'm
do have
remembering
aquifers. You do. Yes, you're correct.
yes, I'm like remembering field trips from elementary school. We went to Edwards Aquifer
Yeah.
for anyone who's from Austin and knows that.
And you got to see the swimming pig. If it's still
Did we?
there. I don't know that's still there. That was in
Oh,
my
I
time,
don't think
so
so.
that's a long time
No.
ago, probably before you.
It might have passed.
But no, so we do have multiple rivers that are still down there, and with a karst topography. What's interesting about the cave is that what everybody may or may not really realize that the cave is still growing. We
Really?
have those underground rivers are still carving out cave passages as we speak. So you can get down in there, and that's where we have a lot of little critters that are down in there, eyeless cave fish and crawfish that are solid white and no eyes. And so there's a whole adaptive
Whoa.
species that have come into the cave environment. And so continuing to see where
Interesting.
and then where it follows, Maddie, is the Green River, the main river that cuts through the park. As
Right.
that river, as with every river in the United States, it continually carves down. With the Grand Canyon, we were losing a width of a paper every year. So the size of that
Right.
thickness was being carved out. They're all different on where they are, but the underground rivers that come in from those above ground sinkholes and sumps, that all falls underground and chases the river. So as
Mm.
the river sinks, so does the cave. So Mammoth Cave really is 5 layers of different cave passage that over time, with the oldest layers being the upper levels, and as the river has
Hmm.
continued to carve new passages over many, many, many years, but now we have 5 different layers stacked on top of each other.
So I would imagine you are always having to evaluate safety and the structure of the caves on top of the
Luckily, they're
caves.
pretty stable.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
Sense.
well, you get in there and it's not like up on the surface. The environment in the cave really never changes, other than the
Mm.
entrances where we'll get a little inflow and outflow, and some colder temperatures may come in a couple 100 feet. The ambient temperature in the cave is always 54 degrees. The humidity level in the certain
Wow.
areas is pretty much always the same. So there's no freeze thaw. There's nothing that really occurs down there that helps break down stuff on the surface. I was in
Interesting.
one section of the cave one time, and there was a newspaper that was out there that was talking about Nixon running for president, and it was still pristine. I could sit there and read the whole article just laying down on a rock that was down a couple hundred feet underground. So it really is unique
Whoa.
how it preserves everything that's
Yeah, it's a
down in
time
there.
capsule in a
It
sense.
is, yes.
I'm even thinking how you're saying these adaptive species that live there. It's making me think of the species that are at the bottom of the ocean that
Right.
live without sunlight,
Right.
essentially,
Exactly.
and are really unique. What type of, and for folks, I had mentioned in the intro that it's over 400 miles long. My understanding is it's now 426 miles long.
That's correct.
Because a few years ago, an extra 6 miles was discovered.
Right.
So I'd love to hear about that experience and how one discovers more trails. Like, who were these people that were discovering these, 400 miles of trails underground, or the additional 6?
Right. No. So we work with two different groups, the Cave Research Foundation and the National Speleological Society, NSS and CRF. But CRF is mostly the group that does a lot of that exploration. And so volunteers come in on their own personal time. There's a lot of weekend events that they plan and come in, and then they have bigger camps that will come in and spend a week in the cave doing this. So they come in, and there can be 40 or 50 of them that'll come in for some of these events, and then they segment out the different sections of the cave where they've seen possible leads that nobody's been down yet. And so that's exactly what they do, Maddie. They get in there and they start crawling on areas that have not been mapped, and they're not sure where it's going to go. They're not sure they're going to be crawling on their belly for a couple hundred yards, and then that leads just going to stop. And then you may be able to turn around, or you may have to back crawl that same part. So it's
not for the folks, like, if you're claustrophobic, that's not something to do. It's not, I don't think it's an organization I would volunteer for.
But then NSS is also here, and they come in and they help us, and they do a lot of restoration work. So areas that over time where we've had dirt trails, as people walk on that puts a fine layer of dust up on the formations, up on the walls that affect the cave environment. So they come in and clean and remove old infrastructure that's out trying to get the caves as pristine as possible. So we couldn't do it without the two organizations and the work that they do to come in and help us.
Are they a national group? Like, do they work at Carlsbad Cavern?
They're both
also?
national groups, yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I'm just shook that people are just going out. Do people camp overnight in the caves if they're far away, or do they kind of?
No, we don't have any camping overnight. They return back. So I'll just say one of the unique experiences I've had is one of my philosophies is probably getting out and seeing what everybody does and just participating. Mm-hmm. So the first month I was here in this job, I went in with CRF into Salt's Cave, which is it's a cave that nobody can get into. It's got a big cave gate. There's a ton of archaeological aspect down in that particular section of the cave. Mm-hmm. But I went in early in the morning, so it was dark. And this is where I'm talking about that newspaper when I found that when I was down there. But we were in there for 12 hours just documenting when I was participating with that and looking for new passages and redocumenting existing routes and using all their specialized tools and equipment that they do to get all of this. But we basically came out, 12 hours later, it was dark again, and it felt like I'd only been in there for a couple hours. But we had to shimmy through some holes that I barely fit through, and we had to climb some areas that you're just climbing up some cliffs. And so it's a great experience. But I have so much respect for all those volunteers that come in and do this. And
that's so cool.
We couldn't do it without them.
So was that, I saw you discovered a shark tooth.
I did.
Was that the same expedition?
No, that was a different one.
Okay.
I try to get in as often as I can, which isn't often enough. Yeah. But no, we had on that shark, we just had, I think it was one of our park staff, if I remember right, or it could have been an old member. But anyways, we found some documentation of some aspects of what we didn't know, what was sticking out of the wall in a passage that's off the main trail, and it's one that you have to get on your hands and knees and crawl, and you got to shimmy around a little, and so it's not a place we can get the public. But so they had that, and they took a picture of it, and so they sent that to an individual, JP Hognett, up in Washington D.C. that specializes in sharks, and he was like, "Oh, I need to come see that. I think that's actually cartilage from a shark, which is almost never preserved.
Wow.
And so he flew in and we took him in there. I had never seen it personally. So when he came in, I'm like, well, I hadn't seen it yet myself. So I'll go in with that group. And
Right.
it's a very small passage. And obviously he was there to do it. So I let he and my cave specialist go up and, they got first view of it. So I just happened to be kind of looking around and looking at the ceilings. And I'm like, hey, this is a unique tooth, because I grew up collecting teeth on the Gulf Coast in Corpus and that area. And so I was like, man, this one's serrated. I've never seen a tooth like this. And just pointed it out to JP, and he came in, he's like, ooh, that is something I need to collect. So he took it, and it happened to be a new species that had never been found.
New to science, shark, as they say.
Yeah. But, we couldn't do that without, my park staff just does a great job trying to get in there. We've had a couple different species that have been found in the cave now. I think we're up to 3 or 4 new species that have been found.
Wow. Of sharks or just of,
yeah.
Well, because I think I read it, that part of the country was underwater.
Yeah,
at one point.
At that
and
time
that's why the fossils
it was
are there.
a shallow seabed at that particular time, a warm seabed, and so that particular area is really rich with a lot of stuff that haven't seen.
A particular time of like 325 million years ago.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Something crazy like that.
So it's kind of unique to have these shark fossils. People like that to begin with, but then also have that in a cave environment. I think just adds to the excitement when you come and see it versus seeing all the. You see plenty of fossils on the limestone there and in Austin and some of those areas out there, and seeing one on the surface is one thing, but seeing these sticking out, like just the other day, I was just on another area and there's a piece of a shark fin that we found in a ceiling.
What?
So yeah, it's unique.
Wow. Yeah, super unique. I mean, again, similar with the shark teeth, I spent some time in Charleston and would collect shark teeth on the coast and stuff. And I'd never really done that before, and it's cool, but there's definitely a different experience of looking up and being like, is that a shark tooth in the rock?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So now I'm constantly looking, I'm tripping all over myself because I'm not looking where I need to be anymore. I'm always looking at the ceiling of what's going on around me now. So
yeah, you had a little bit too much beginner's luck of I
had way too much beginner's luck. I was definitely at the right place at the right time. Yeah. So, but it was sheer dumb luck.
Now it's every time you're like, well, I kind of expect to discover a new species. So
I think all our staff are even looking even more now because we've had another one. The Tollison shark was the first one that our guide found, Kelly Tollison found, and so that one was named after her. And then so I think a lot of our guides are in there now looking, and it's like, all right, what can we go find?
They need a namesake shark tooth. You had mentioned that folks usually need a guide to go into the caves. What type of expeditions as a visitor can folks explore? How long are the hikes typically?
They range, and so we have some. We start. Well, say one. We have an accessible tour that we think is important. We have an elevator here in the cave, so we're able to get people with some challenges into the cave so they can see that. But it's outside of that, we just have a whole cadre of tours, both in length and timing, and so some are probably about an hour is our shortest one, and that can go anywhere up to 6 to 8 hours on our wild cave tour, where you're in coveralls and you've got to have the right footwear, and you're in some areas that your head this way from top to bottom with your helmet will not fit through some of the stuff that you have to crawl through. So you've got to turn your head sideways.
Oh my gosh.
To get through. But so it's a great experience. I've had the pleasure to do that. It was fun, but it is one that, we find a lot of times that people sometimes cannot be prepared or they're not getting to what they get to. So one of the things we recently just did was created a video that I think is on recreation.gov now or will be shortly, that gives some experiences of what the wild cave tour is and the footwear that you have to have, and just trying to make sure that people are prepared and ready for the experience, for what they're going to get. Because as you said early on with your claustrophobic, even people get in, and we have some pretty large passages. Some people get in and, just it's not for them, and we have to walk them out and take them off the tour and come back out the entrance because they felt they wanted to do it, but the body and the mind just didn't allow it.
Yeah, it's making me think of, I've scuba dived once, and it's really interesting because I wouldn't say I'm necessarily claustrophobic, but it's an anxiety-provoking situation the first time you do it, and I would imagine being in the cave in a really narrow space could be that same. Yeah. But with scuba diving, it's, you have your oxygen tank, and it is a lifeline to breathe slowly and calmly. And so it was such an interesting practice because I was feeling so nervous, but it would like actually was really good because I was forcing myself to breathe calmly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I can't even, it's scary to think of like you like starting to like hyperventilate or something
Yeah.
underwater like that. But I feel like it'd be similar in the cave of you're there, you're kind of stuck. You just have to the best of your ability, really practice those deep breathing skills and be like, okay, they're not closing in on me. It's not moving.
That is true.
We are fine.
Yep, that's sure.
Was your first experience in the cave once you were superintendent, or had you come as a visitor?
No, I'd come as a visitor before. I'd brought my kids up here. I don't know if it was summer or spring break, but we stayed at the campground and we got them on some cave tours when they were young.
Yeah, that's cool. I had read about, so the Great American Outdoors Act, it's been cool to see all the different areas that this act has played a part in the Park Service. My understanding is that that act helped fund the Cave Trail Rehabilitation Project. So I'd love to hear kind of the current status. My understanding is that the cave trails hadn't really been fully updated since the 1930s. So it sounds like it's a big effort and initiative.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the civilian conservation, the CCC, was the last group that was in here when the park was created in the early 40s. And so they were right before the park was created and right during after were in there laying some of those cave trails that were just surface dirt that they would take from borrow pits from elsewhere in the cave and cover that rock to create somewhat of a level walking surface. And so, yeah, over almost 100 years, that dirt picks up on your feet, gets transferred to different areas of the cave. It was no longer a consistent flat surface. It was dimply, almost like a golf ball, just the way the dirt had moved and certain things. So a lot of tripping hazards and a lot of things. So the park's really been busy trying to do that. But yeah, we got that GOA project to take a section from our what's called our new entrance out to frozen Niagara. And so we hardened that whole section and made some other improvements. There was a lot of slopes that were in there that, you would take 2 steps up, slide 1 step back, 2 steps up, 1 step back. And so we were able to put stairs in those locations. So it's
cool.
So it's easier. We were able to put some elevated boardwalks in so you get some different perspectives in some bigger rooms to come and look at the Lover's Leap function. We also had a lake in there, Crystal Lake, that was at the previous time was just a cement pathway that went through, but then all the electrical conduit and all the other stuff was in front of that and a railing. And so you really couldn't even look over and see the lake. So we were able to take that and make that a see-through walkway now. And so you've got much better visuals of Crystal Lake, and took some lead-based paint stairs out. So we get rid of all that. What was in the cave environment needed to be removed and replace it all with stainless steel. And so we really had a great opportunity to make that improvement. So, and it also helps a little bit with just thinking about possible rescue operations. We hope that they never happen, but trying to make those stairs and some of the walkways wider now helps with our rescue teams if they have to go in. So it was kind of trying to take every little bit of what we could think about for improvements and incorporate it all in that design. But it's completed and that trail's open.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have 2 thoughts on that. The first is, I know we've talked about the caves being 423 miles of trails, but you talking about all the different things, I'm like, this is massive. It's like a whole little world under there. So that piece is sticking out to me. And then the second is, I actually did want to, that's a good segue, because I did want to ask about the search and rescue team, because my guess is that it's a little bit different than kind of the setup for a lot of other parks, just in the nature of the type of recreation, the fact that people typically shouldn't really be in the cave without an experienced professional or a tour guide.
Right.
So how is that search and rescue team set up at Mammoth Cave?
Well, I'd say it's an interdisciplinary team. I mean, it's kind of all hands on deck when something comes in. Luckily, we haven't had any in my tenure, and we haven't had any in a while. We really try to do an aspect that's done really well here, and it's more preventative. I guess search and rescue is probably what we would call it best. I mean, as people come in, for every tour that comes in, they're given a talk before you even go in, and we talk about low ceilings, we talk about tripping hazards, we talk about what you should and shouldn't do, just to try to get everybody in the right frame of mind of what they're getting into. And then what we really talk about is to the point we were talking about with claustrophobia and everything else there, is that if you think this is going to be difficult, and even if you're not claustrophobic, knowing that if anything did happen, it could be hours before we could get in there and do that. If something was to ever happen, finding any wood I could knock on. But on the Whale Cave tour, I mean, that's off the beaten path. You're in rock and, trying to get a litter or a cave stair chair in there to help transport somebody out would be a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
Some of those areas are unforgiving, but for most of it is not. I mean, most of it is designed just as we were just talking about with those trails that we're putting in. We've put in trails from the historic entrance through the whole historic route now, which is the vast majority of our visitation takes that. So that trail now is dead. And then before we did this one with GOA, we had gotten money to do another section that tied in from our elevator to an area right there at the new entrance. Cool. And that we just talked about what we did there. So we're slowly tying all the pieces together. Most of the toured main trail will all be that hardened surface, which makes it much easier to get there. But we're continuing to try to do more preventative information than search and rescue. And like we said, that crawling tour video we just created and we're in the process of doing and getting up gives people a really good visual of what you're going to be encountering. I think it's different, but you get into an area and the first thing you do, unfortunately, the cave is not forgiving. So the size of the individual is an aspect that you have to take into consideration. So one of the things we do on the wild cave tours, first thing you go through is called the mole hole. And so I fit through it, but I've got a picture of it. Basically, my boots are sticking out the mole hole, and that's about this.
Oh my gosh.
And that's about the size of the hole. So it's 12 inches maybe.
Oh
and
my
so
gosh.
depending on your circumference and your shoulders, like a big football player, he is not going to get through there. So it's just unfortunate that. So we're just trying to put all that on video and just trying to make people fully aware before they get here, so they're not disappointed when they think they're going to do this and they can't. Right. So again, trying to be preventative as best we can.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the park is the variety of activities that people can have. And it's kind of different ranges of risk tolerance. And like there's inherent risk with a wild tour, or, going into the backcountry in Yellowstone or something like that. And it's been cool to see how a lot of the parks, and I think it was the Grand Canyon that started the preventative search and rescue.
Yeah, I was there when we started that. So we've got the rangers that are just, trying to gauge people. I mean, we put them out on the trails and they're there to kind of gauge people as they're going down. And we never tell people they can't do it, but just question them before they get there. It's amazing how many people would start hiking down into the canyon that didn't even have any water. And so you're about to head to somewhere where it's 115 degrees in the middle of the summer and you don't have any water.
You're like, how does that make you feel?
And some people would turn around and say, hey, thanks for the advice. I'm going to turn around. And some people would still say, hey, I know what I'm doing. I can go. It's like, all right, you go.
It's a little bit different, but it's making me think of a couple years ago, I ran the New York City Marathon. And when you finish, they have all these med tents. And I'd never run a marathon before. And it's like the most extreme athletic endeavor I've done. So I hadn't really experienced this before, but I remember sitting down because I was tired and people are on it and they tell you to stand up. The med people are looking every single runner in the eye walking by to make sure that they're okay and not delusional or all of that. And it was really interesting. And I was mad at the time. I was like, I'm so tired. I want to sit down. But it was the hardest it's ever been to get up. It's just such a crazy thing because you're running straight for 26 miles. And then literally I stopped. I got they give you a little snack pack and I sit down to drink the chocolate milk or something. And my legs stopped working.
They gave out right there.
Okay, we're done. Yeah. And I was I literally was running about 3 minutes ago and I can't get up.
Yeah.
What? But
I can only imagine. I haven't done that.
Yeah, it's an experience. I mean, it was one of the coolest things I've done, but I did not get the bug. Some people do it once and they're like, oh, I can't wait to do another one. And I was like, no, I'm good. That was enough.
This was off my bucket list. I'm not doing it again, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So I know there's some history with how people used the caves in American history. Was it used as a storage place or a hiding place?
It's been used for, a lot of different aspects. I mean, at some point, the first Native American first users of it were probably, up to 4,000 years ago. And so that's when we see first documented aspects of them coming in and mining minerals and different aspects off the wall. I mean, this is the part of the preservation we were talking about. The cane reed torches that they would walk in there with are still there. And the stoke marks that they would do on the side of the cave to get some of the ash off are still there. So it's just amazing when you look at how self-preservation, the cave environment really is. But you've got that group that started way back then, and then it's been toured for tourism for over 200 years. with different way before
that's crazy.
the park was even
That's a long
established.
time.
Yeah, private owners were running tourism, but even before that, the War of 1812, a lot of the gunpowder, the saltpeter that is needed to make gunpowder was mined out of the cave. So there's still mining operation that are still transparent in the cave, and some of the structures, some of the vats that they would separate the dirt from the saltpeter are still there and in existence for people to see. So it runs a whole gamut from 4,000 years ago all the way to here. And then on top of the surface, there's that same history. When the park was created, there was about 500 families that were inhabiting the land and farming the land up above. And then that was all during the 30s, most of the 30s, early 40s, that was all acquired by an outside entity. And then all of that was transferred into the Park Service when the park was created. So there is a lot of history that comes with this particular park.
Yeah, what outside entity was originally acquiring
so
the land?
Mammoth Cave National Park Association was established in the 30s when the bill was first created that, yes, Mammoth Cave could be a park, but the National Park Service or U.S. Congress wasn't going to go through and condemn these lands. So they said they gave a minimum amount that had to be purchased. And when that was there, that it could be transferred into the Park Service and the park could be created. So the Mammoth Cave National Park Association was created. And it still is in existence today. I mean, we still work with them today on different aspects where they help the park out. And so it's still in existence.
Is that the current Mammoth Cave Friends group, or is there another nonprofit partner?
There is another nonprofit that does that too. The Friends of Mammoth Cave is the other nonprofit that we have.
That's also a quick tangent. Something I've learned in this endeavor is how supported the parks are by their friends groups and how crucial they are. I didn't really know about them, honestly, before pursuing this. So what projects has the Friends of Mammoth Cave recently enabled?
They really work with us. I mean, environmental education and kids are obviously important. And so they do a lot of time and effort helping us with that. And so last year we probably saw, and now this is not all on site, this is on site. We send rangers to school. And the one plus of COVID is the fact that we learned the green screen. So we now do a lot of virtual stuff too. But we probably saw over 63,000 kids last year. And this is where, the Friends of Mammoth Cave is probably the main fundraiser that comes in to do that. But we also do get a little bit of funding from the Mammoth Cave National Park Association, from the National Park Foundation and the National Park Trust. So they all have these grants that we apply for. But we're able to pay for the buses and the transportation fees to get all the kids to come into the park, and a small fee for the cave tour to come in. And we also kind of utilize that funding, which I think is really good, as we do teacher workshops. And so they're usually overnight workshops that come in for a weekend or possibly a school day, and the teachers just take a day or two off and bring in a substitute. But they come in and learn from our educators to what they could do, and they learn about the different aspects we would train the kids with on site. Something about how limestone, how the caves are created, how limestone, you use the carbonic acid and watch the limestone kind of start eating away, and pollinators and all the different aspects that come with a national park. We teach them what we teach the kids so they can take it back to the classrooms and teach their own kids that aspect as well. So those teacher workshops really cool. Are always a really good thing to do as well.
Where do the teachers usually stay? Are they on campgrounds?
Most of the time, the CRF, that Cave Research Foundation we talked about earlier, they have a site just off the park boundary where they have what's called Hamilton Valley. And so they have a couple little dormitory kind of rooms, and they work with the park and let the teachers stay over there. So they're close, but have a place to stay, because sometimes they come from all over the state of Kentucky. In fact, last time I think we had somebody from Ohio. They still come from around, mostly in Kentucky, but they're starting to get outside of that too.
Very cool. How, this is a good segue kind of when we were talking about Indigenous groups also, but how has Mammoth Cave historically engaged with both local communities and Indigenous groups in the area? It sounds like a lot of it is through education, but are there any other partnerships, or how have you engaged with them in the past?
Well, I would just say, we'll start with the communities. And just, for me, it's inherent in my style is to have those conversations early, often, and all the time. So when I get to in each individual park, meeting with the partners outside the park is one of the first things I end up doing. You have to do it. You can't some people may see the parks as these little islands that are protected because this is federal land, this is protected, and it really comes down to what we talked about earlier with the karst. I mean, what happens outside the park has big effects on the park, and your partners have a big effect. And we're really an economic driver for South Central Kentucky, for this little rural area of Kentucky. So it's important for me to be able to get out and have those conversations. So I'm out all the time meeting with all the different partners. And as far as the indigenous, that's a little more difficult in that none of the affiliated tribes are within the area. Like at Grand Canyon, we used to meet with those tribes all the time. Here, most of them are not here, but it's like in a couple of weeks, the first week of May, I think, I'm going to Oklahoma to go meet with some of the tribes. And so, it can continue to build those relationships. We're not going with anything that has to be discussed. It really is, let's go out and just build that relationship so you have it. So if something adversarial does happen in the past, hopefully you've built that relationship so you can have those discussions with somebody and not just a name on a wall. So we'll be doing that, and I'll be doing that in here in a couple of weeks.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. And it's interesting to think of the scenarios where they are closer to the park still, or aren't near anymore, and then that creates different scenarios. With the local communities, who are the partners that you typically work with? I know it sounds like there's the Friends group, but I guess who are other people that you initially connected with?
Well, obviously, Mammoth Cave has 3 counties that are within authorized boundary. And so for you might know them as the county commissioners. Here they're known as judge executives. So get out and meet with the county executives right away. I meet with all the tourism boards for all 3 counties because tourism is a key development for all of them. So we're obviously getting their input. The convention bureaus. So it really is just kind of, a little bit of everybody that's out there. I meet with a lot of the state people within the governor's office, the state parks, how we can continue to work with them as well. The State Historic Preservation Office is another one that we meet with often. In fact, I'll be going up there in about 2 weeks to go have a 2-day meeting with them on just all the upcoming projects. So they're fully aware of what's coming and get some of their feedback right now on things we should be considering that maybe we haven't looked at yet.
What is that organization?
The State Historic Preservation Office. They're known as the SHPOs.
The SHPOs, got it. Now I remember.
And that's the same way with to your point, another one with the tribes. The tribes have their own, which are called the TIPOs, the Tribe Historic Preservation Offices. So at the same time, we're meeting with those. Anytime we work with cultural resources or historic buildings or cultural landscapes, I mean, we always involve all those entities and then the discussion of what's going to be best. So we hopefully get consensus. We don't always get consensus, but we strive for that early.
Right. A fun question I have to ask is, say you're going for like a tour in the caves for a long day. What is your favorite snack to bring?
You'll probably laugh, but it's probably it's a combination of either almonds or cashews just to get some salt in there, and then usually like a fruit roll up or Gushers.
Oh, heck yeah. That's awesome. It's so funny because I've started asking superintendents this question just as a fun little thing. And I was talking to Ed Keeble, the Grand Canyon superintendent, and he was like, I just like bringing candy. I bring paydays into the park. And I was like, you're going straight to the source, that's how I feel I never really eat Cliff Bars. I really like Cliff Bars, but I only eat them when I'm skiing.
Yeah.
It's like a weird, I always just get them at the grocery and kind of nibble on it all day. And it's just my skiing snack.
Yeah. No, we all have them. I'm saying with you, I don't eat them outside of going on a hike, but it's like, hey, that sounds good.
I might start adding Gushers and fruit roll-ups to my hiking repertoire. I haven't had those in a long time, so I'll think of you when I do that next time.
Yeah, something a little sweeter because you need the salt. You need to keep that going with you.
You need both.
Yeah.
You need the energy from the sugar.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Kind of a different question. We mentioned briefly the Green River, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about both the Green and the Nolan Rivers Blue Way and their connection with Mammoth Cave.
Yeah, no, that was something where we got here, and it's just, I'll say when I got here, and I think you hit on it well, this park really is two parks in one. We had the surface and we had the subterranean. And so the surface I thought was being a little overlooked. And so it's getting in and trying to get a national designation for the Blueway was something that was going to be challenging. But at the same time, to your previous question, to me, it's important to have community buy-in on this. I mean, it just doesn't do us any good to start at our boundary here and then end at the boundary here when the river is several hundred miles long and everybody can benefit from it. So that was one of the things. And another partner that we met with was Cave Country Trails. And so they're big at promoting all the different tourism and trail activities outside of the park proper. And so we met with them and we kind of pitched this idea. It's like, look, we really want to do this, but we don't want it to be Mammoth Cave specific. Would you be willing to take this endeavor on? And we'll obviously help and do all this. And they said they could see it and said, heck yeah. So actually the permit isn't written by Mammoth Cave National Park. The application was written by Cave Country Trails, and the Blueway extends outside of our northern boundary and also outside of our southern boundary. And so, as more opportunities arise, where we can get the put-ins and the takeouts within the predetermined mileage, we hope to extend that Blueway further up in both, north and south of the park. But we're dealing with some private property, dealing with other entities where you may not be able to get that. They typically want those put-in takeouts about every 8 miles, so people can.
What's a put-in?
Free, where you can get the
like
canoes. Put in your canoes and take out. So you don't want to put in at, like there's a town up north of us. You don't want to put it at Mumfordville, and you may have to raft 20 miles before you can get to the next takeout, and that may be a little too far.
A long day.
Exactly. So that's why there's some parameters. So we're still trying to work through that, but that really was a joint partnership that was done with the community to get that done. And what's really fun about it is the Green is probably one of the most biologically diverse rivers on the eastern seaboard. And so with all the different freshwater mussels, look that one up, because it is an
like that people can eat the freshwater mussels?
Well, no, you can't collect them in the park, but they're there to see. So you could, I guess, but not in the park. But no, we have several threatened and endangered species that we're working to continue to improve their habitat. We luckily had an area, not luckily, but the Green River has a system of lock-in dams that were established over 100 years ago for transportation. And right before I got here, lock-in dam number 6, which was just outside the park boundary, failed on Thanksgiving night. And so the river at certain areas dropped anywhere from, just a couple inches to over 10 feet overnight with that failure of that dam. So what used to be impounded water, basically lake water, where you just had no current, no flow, you're paddling, I'm sure you've paddled on a lake. It's not near as much fun as a river where the current takes you.
Yeah, no.
With that failing overnight, almost all of the park now became free-flowing water, which has also increased the habitat for the mussels. So it's really been, ecologically, it's been a good aspect for the river. And that's when we were able to get the designation as the Blueway, because, most of the water at that particular time was now free-flowing.
And is a Blueway a common term for like a preserved river, or is that just the name of the area?
No, it's a common term more for the amount of mileage that's used for it. It's basically a blue or a river hiking trail. If you want to look at a different term, it would be the name of the hiking trail on the surface would go from here to here. The Blueway is a designation for that same trail from point A to point B on the river.
Yeah, the Google is saying essentially exactly what you said, a marked route along a navigable waterway, such as a river, lake, canal, or coastline for recreational use.
Yeah, and it's the first and only national Blueway, in the state.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And that was done while you came in as superintendent, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. How do people typically recreate? Are they like canoeing and kayaking and camping along the shores and stuff?
Yes, all of the above. So we have 3 put in and take out points. One at the north end, Denison Ferry, which is the one that's most heavily used. And then we've got Green River and then Houchins Ferry location. And then the Brownsville and the Edmonson County have done a good job with the old Lock-in Dam 6 site. And they've got another takeout even further than that. So that's where it's flowing, going outside the park into the local communities, which is exactly what we wanted.
Do you have to reserve the campsites, or is it you can just pull up on shore wherever?
Right now, there's some parameters of where you have to be, but all the islands and some floodplains areas, it's all first come, first serve. We're in the process of doing a backcountry management plan right now.
Ooh.
And one of the things that we're doing with that is trying to incorporate some reservable campsites that would be on the river. Because as you know, there's always two types of people. There's the type of people like, me that are just like, hey, I'll find it where I find it and it'll be good. There's the other group that really likes a plan, that, wants to know where they're going to be staying. They have a place to stay, makes them.
That's fair. It's fair to see both.
Yeah, no, I think it is. So we're trying to get some here in the future that will have reservable campsites on the river as well.
Okay. And do people do the shuttle car system? Is there a shuttle to get people between the drop off and the end point?
Most of what's utilized right now is we have some commercial use authorization permit holders, 3 permit holders that shuttle people in and pick them up. So you can leave your car at some other place. The private activity is obviously picking up. And so that is, they're shuttling their own vehicles, but there is no shuttle service that takes you from point A to point B.
I know. Again, as I said, the bucket list just gets longer. I'm like, well, to a canoeing trip and a wild cave tour have been added.
It's a great way to come to experience the park.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for our time. I feel like I learned a ton about Mammoth Cave. Even in my research and in prepping, it's just fun to hear from your experience. And a way I like to wrap up the interviews is with the question of, what do you wish everyone knew about Mammoth Cave National Park, regardless of if they have or haven't been?
I'd say a lot. You hit on a lot of it right now. And I think as we just talked about, but I think it's, as I talk to visitors, as I'm out and about, it's amazing to kind of hear about how surprised they are that they like Mammoth Cave. I think you hit on it well, that I think everybody kind of thinks of us as the longest cave in the world, and that's the different aspects of what there. And so it really is, from the visitor's perspective, what I hear, they call it, I love the term, the hidden gem. It's something that they weren't there, because I think it's important. Most people don't realize that, the park is actually, it's a World Heritage Site. It's the core component of an international biosphere. And then we're also an international dark sky. 3 aspects where you can come in, and as you were just talking about, you can go spend the day on the wild cave tour. Then you can spend the afternoon on the river seeing, we have bald eagles, so you can have the opportunity to see that. We have the topography and the ruggedness and the cliffs and the gorges that are forming the Green and the Nolan rivers is pretty fantastic to look at. And then the night sky is obviously something that's pretty spectacular for the East Coast. Doesn't, you take it where it is, but obviously the cave geology and the history is fascinating. It's there. Yeah. So it really is kind of 2 or 3 parks in one, with the surface and the subterranean. And I just think we're more than an underground attraction that we have. And I think we really do have something for everybody. And so that's what I just hope everybody will get out of it. Come and enjoy it. And I think you hit on it well with all the kayaking, the equestrian use, the mountain bike. We have a mountain biking trail and hiking trails. And so there's a little something to do for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I'm intrigued. So
well, come on.
Cave. Yeah. Well, thank you, Barclay. I appreciate it. It's been great chatting.
That was good. Well, thank you.
Thanks so much for listening today. Our music was composed by Danielle Bees. If you liked this podcast, rate, review, download, and tell your friends about it. This ensures the stories of our national parks and how they are run are shared. Listen to the other episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts, or visit us at whorunthispark.com to learn more. I'm Maddie Pellman, and you've been listening to Who Runs This Park.